Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lisa Cooper. I'm a registered dietitian at the Orlando Health Center for Health Improvement, and I'd like you to welcome you today to our webinar on food and mood. And before I get started, I just want to let you know that if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and at the end of the presentation, I will address any questions you may have. So with that, let's get started. I wanted to introduce you to a little bit of background about food and mood before we got into the details. And there's a new and emerging science called nutritional psychology. And it is the study that examines the relationship between what we're eating and how we feel. So our mood, our behavior, our mental health. And this is a relatively new field in the past about 5 to 10 years. And some of the comments about nutritional psychiatry is because it's so new, the research is just beginning. So the evidence provides that there's a relationship between nutrition and mental health, but it's mainly correlational. So that's what Aiden had said in 2019. And so there's a gap in the understanding. And Dinan in 2018 mentioned that there is a link between this nutrition and mental health, but it's just beginning to emerge. And we can eventually find these correlations and then study them and make recommendations in the future for dietary changes. So we're really in the infancy of nutritional psychology. But here's the thing, dietitians have known for years that changing your diet, making it an improved diet quality, actually helps people improve their mood. They feel better when they change their diet. So today we're just going to look at the science behind that, what we found out so far, and what things may help make a difference in how you feel. And this is an involved slide, but I just want you to get the idea of where the science is coming from. We look at our food and what we're taking in, but there's so many factors involved in this. There's age, there's the times we're eating, our mental health, our metabolic health, exercise, and all of those things influence actually our gut, we're finding out. Our gut is an important piece to our mood regulation. It's activated by what we call the microbiome, which are the bacteria that are in our gut that actually talk to our brain through the vagus nerve. And it sends impulses and neurotransmitters, metabolites up, and it's telling our brain certain things. So we're just learning about what that might be. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that. And we know from epidemiological studies that if people eat this way, they tend to feel better. We're still looking at it from experimental medicine, one-on-one with clients, and we're starting to figure out what we should study. And the clinical trials have now started. So you're going to see a variety of research that I'll be talking about today. But it really starts with this gut-brain axis. And I'm going to show you a little video here on the gut-brain axis.
What is the gut-brain axis? You know the expression, I feel it in my gut. Well, it makes more sense than you think, because our brain and gut are connected, like when we say we have butterflies, or when something is gut-wrenching. That's our brain and gut communicating. The gut nervous system is so active and important that it is sometimes called the second brain. Scientists call this connection the gut-brain axis. It's a two-way dialogue between the two organs. A key link between the gut and the brain is the vagus nerve. After the spinal cord, it's the biggest nerve in the body. And, put simply, it makes it possible for your brain and your gut to talk to each other. In fact, 80 to 90% of nerve fibers in the vagus nerve are going from the gut to the brain. What role can a gut bacteria play in the gut-brain axis? The bacteria in your gut produce more than 90% of the serotonin found in your body. This neurotransmitter can affect your mood and feelings of happiness and pleasure.
So I think that's a really great introduction to how the foods affect our bodies and how it may affect our brains. And the one thing that was talking about was serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that impacts our mood, our sleep habits, how hungry we are. It plays such an important role. And 90% of the serotonin receptors are in the gut. So we know that we're finding out that what we eat affects that serotonin and other neurotransmitters. But we also know that just a couple hours of being really stressed out can actually also change our gut microbiota. So it's not just our food, but it's also how we're feeling. It makes that gut very vulnerable and sensitive. So it's important to practice not only nutrition, but also other great mental health things like relaxation. In order to really get a feel for what foods are important, I wanted to define some of the foods that impact the gut. So there are the different biotics. So there's probiotics, and most of us have heard of that when we think about like a yogurt. It has the good bacteria like lactobacillus in it. So it is the good bacteria in the gut that promote butyrate, which is a metabolite that is beneficial to the body. Then there's prebiotics. And prebiotics are the foods we eat that feed those good bacteria. So when they eat on them, they have that production of the butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid that's beneficial to us. And then the postbiotic is actually that butyrate. So after those good bacteria eat the food, it produces this butyrate, which is called the postbiotic, and which is really beneficial to us. So I just wanted to start with those definitions. So we know some of the foods that we eat will actually improve our mood, help with depressed feelings, and probiotics are one of those things because the chemicals from our gut are sent to the brain. And we're finding that people with depression have different gut bacteria than people without it. So they have bacteria that promotes inflammation, which is not great for our brains, and they are lacking the bacteria that are associated with a good quality of life. So one of the things you can do is start by feeding your body some of those good probiotics, and lactobacillus is one of them. And it's found in things like yogurt, things that carry that active culture, or kefir, which is basically like a liquid yogurt. Just watch out with kefir, it's high in sugars, some of them, so you'd want to get the ones that does not have sugar in it. Buttermilk is another cultured dairy product that will help with the lactobacillus. And then there's some fermented foods. So there's natto, which is a fermented soybean. They take soybeans and they soak them overnight, and then they steam them, and then they ferment them. And from there, you can eat them that way, or they press them into like cake, and they call that tempeh, or it's made into a paste, which is miso. You may be familiar with miso soup. So there's a variety of ways you can get it from the soy products. There's also fermented foods like kimchi, which is sauerkraut that has been fermented, and it's cabbage that's fermented and it's spicy. And also kombucha, which is a sweet tea that they add good bacteria to. They add yeast, and they ferment it, and that also would carry these healthy bacteria to our gut. Then there's also foods that have fiber that feed that good bacteria. And so it helps to decrease inflammation, cancer cell growth, and increase the healthy cells. And so these are what we call those prebiotics. So it's the high fiber foods like beans and legumes. Oats are fantastic, bananas and berries. So I'm thinking every day, if you have oatmeal with berries on it and snack on a banana, have some hummus as a snack, those are great ways to feed that good gut bacteria. Then the mixture of onion and garlic and leeks. So if you're cooking more with that, using that to make a tomato sauce, for example, at night, or a salsa. Asparagus and Jerusalem artichokes, all of those are fantastic for feeding your gut bacteria. Another thing are unsaturated fats. So they found in correlational studies that people who eat more unsaturated fat are less likely to have depressed feelings. So unsaturated fats include the monounsaturated fats. So it's things like olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil. It's avocado, olives, nuts and seeds, and peanut butter. Including more of those good healthy fats in our diet is a good idea. But they also found the polyunsaturated fats are also very important, and they alone, like they've studied just DHA and EPA, which are the polyunsaturated omega-3s, can reduce depressive symptoms. So including things like fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and tuna, herring and sardines, I kind of italicized just because those are higher sodium to be aware of. And if you're not a fish eater, you can still get those omega-3s from things like walnuts and chia. Spices are loaded with antioxidants, and that helps the brain fight free radicals, which are things that can damage the cells in our brain. So it helps to prevent the oxidative stress and tissue damage. One of those would be saffron, and saffron is actually dried stigma of the from the crocus flower. And in a study in 2013, they found that people with major depressive symptoms greatly reduced their symptoms by including saffron. And it is good in things like pale risotto or in tea. Turmeric is also very common as a strong antioxidant and is associated with less depression. And it's mainly the curcumin that's in the turmeric. And when they studied it, they were looking at 500 to 1,000 milligrams of curcumin. 1 tablespoon of turmeric has only about 136 milligrams of curcumin. So it seems like you'd have to do a lot to get to that 500 milligram dose. But what they recommend is actually adding pepper, which has pepperine in it, and that increases the absorption of the curcumin by 2,000%. So thinking about adding turmeric in a variety of ways, in a variety of dishes. It could be in tea, it could be in your soups or stews or in salad dressing, but to incorporate it in those kinds of dishes. So things that you may want to avoid that can actually increase depressive symptoms include sugars. They found a study where they had people, if you drink 1 soda a day, it increases your risk of depression by 5%. Drinking 2.5 sodas a day increases your risk of depression by 25%. And they really feel like it's an inflammation process that affects the brain. And refined carbohydrates also fall in that category because white bread, white rice, white pastas, those type of carbs actually are ingested, when we ingest them, are processed like sugars in our body. So they feel like those fall in the same category. Artificial sweeteners are another thing to consider. And I wrote there, the debate continues because there's 2 sides to the coin. The research goes in both directions. Chaudhary does a lot of research. He's a neuroscientist that does a lot of research on artificial sweeteners. And he feels that, has found that aspartame affects the neurotransmitters or the feel-good transmitters in the brain, like dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin. But then there's research on the other side of the coin. Some saying, you know, it can affect the good bacteria in our gut, but a recent study in 2020 said they did a really good crossover design. It's a small group of people, but they showed that there was no change in gut bacteria. It was funded by a big cola company, so there were some questions to that about the research, but in general, you're looking at 2 sides of the coin. It's going back and forth. So I just said, you know, be aware of it. If you're having trouble with depressive symptoms, maybe not using an artificial sweetener might be helpful. With fried foods, they found people in Japan who ate a greater quantity of fried foods had higher depressive symptoms. So limiting those are actually healthy for your body anyway, along with trans fats. Even though trans fats have been limited or eliminated from the American food supply, they are also associated with a higher risk of depression. And then the last thing on my list for foods to watch out for are nitrates. Nitrates are used in processed meats as a preservative or a coloring agent. And we've known for years that nitrates can initiate cancers, especially of the gut. So we're thinking that it may alter that good gut bacteria. So limiting those processed and red meats is not a bad idea also. So the way to look at it is really the overall diet, not just these single foods, but this is a takeaway for you. When you're looking through these keeps and tosses, it works for some people, it may not work for others, but if you change your overall nutrition plan, it has a higher impact. And the Mediterranean diet is not only associated with reducing your risk for heart disease and cancer, but it also can reduce some of the depressive symptoms. And it's more of a lifestyle. It's not just the food, but it's being active and drinking water, It's increased using fresh available herbs and spices and buying local. It's mainly fruits and vegetables and grains. So it's plant-based nutrition with a little bit of red meat as usually as a treat, poultry and fish more often, and limiting those sugars. So think about, if you're thinking about improving your mood, a Mediterranean diet might be the way to proceed. If you're somebody who's anxious, they find that people who are anxious actually have different gut bacteria also. They're missing those good gut bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And those can be propagated by, just like with the other slide I showed you, including fermented and cultured foods. And people who include more of those are associated with lower anxiety. And really feeding those good bacteria with high fiber foods, because it promotes the growth of those good bacteria. So I just listed a few high fiber foods, but if you're thinking like plants, so it's fruits and vegetables, whole grain breads and cereals, nuts and seeds, all of those are very good plant-based foods to include. And then again, turmeric is that antioxidant, and it's associated with a lower risk of anxiety. And you can include that in something like a golden milk, where you have a glass of, let's say, almond milk, and you add in a teaspoon of turmeric, a little bit of black pepper to that, and some honey, and you warm that for about 5 minutes on the stovetop. You top it with some nutmeg, and it's a nice way to get that turmeric in. And then low levels of vitamin D are also associated with anxiety. And I find in practice that more people are deficient or low in vitamin D than you would ever think or realize. So that would be something that, if you haven't had your vitamin D checked, to have it checked by your physician. Dietary sources of vitamin D include things like fatty fish like salmon and trout, in milk that's been fortified, and in mushrooms that have been treated with UV light. Now, there are some foods to avoid if you're feeling anxious, and I put the 3 at the top that are associated with the Western diet, because they found the Western diet is makes changes to your brain, and they feel like it may be because less serotonin is able to be absorbed if you're eating a lot of fatty, red and processed meat, sugary foods, and refined carbohydrates. So I picture somebody who's, let's call it a fast food diet, who's not really paying attention to what's going into their body, are more likely to have a Western style diet. With caffeine, they know, and most people who have anxiety know, that caffeine can make you more anxious. And it's because caffeine shuts down parts of the brain that regulate anxiety. In small amounts, it's okay, but in more than 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day, like if you're getting over that 400 milligrams, you really want to limit and cut it back. With alcohol, it's just a matter of watching how much. They find that people who are anxious, especially if it's like a social anxiety, may use alcohol to help calm their nerves. Just watch how much you're having of that. And then again, artificial sweeteners. Again, that's our researcher, our neuroscientist, Dr. Chaudhary, who is associating anxiety with artificial sweeteners. And last, we want to talk about a little bit about memory, because gut bacteria actually can trigger metabolic processes in the brain that cause inflammation and affect the memory. It also can impact cortisol, which decreases your ability to access long-term memories. So some of the things that you may be able to do, they found that alcohol in small amounts can actually be beneficial for memory, like no more than 3 drinks a week for a woman or 5 for a man. But anything more than that can actually be detrimental to your memory. So that's kind of a double-edged sword. I thought twice about even putting it up here. Again, the coffee, it has to be under 400 milligrams. So that's that 2 to 3 cup guideline. And then the turmeric and cinnamon are antioxidants, which help protect the neurons in our brain from inflammation. So those are good things to include. On the flip side, we've got that Western diet again. it damages parts of the brain that involve memory in the hippocampus. So it increases the oxidative stress, increases inflammation, and that basically damages brain cells. So that's how they feel that the connection is for that. The good news is this is reversible with changing your diet and exercising more. You actually can make a change to your gut bacteria, which actually can make a change in how your brain fog is doing. And just like with the depressive symptoms, with memory, there is a diet, an overall nutrition plan that helps support your brain. And this is called the MIND diet. And the National Institute on Aging did a study, or supported a study, that put together the Mediterranean diet along with the DASH diet, which they use for blood pressure control. They combined them and found out that if people eat in this pattern, it actually reduces the risk of Alzheimer's, which is just a huge finding. And so I just want you to take a look at some of the things they're recommending. It's not far off from what we've covered in the Mediterranean diet. You're going to include whole grains, so not the refined grains, at least 3 servings a day. Green leafy vegetables almost every day. That's part of Mediterranean diet too. Other vegetables definitely included in there besides the green leafies on a daily basis, including berries a couple times a week, nuts and seeds 5 days a week at least, including that fatty fish and poultry more often, and beans at least 3 times a week. And then alcohol in moderation, which makes sense as we saw on the other slide. And then really using olive oil. Olive oil is high in what they call polyphenols, which is awesome. They're awesome antioxidants, so great for protecting the brain. But just as important on including these foods is avoiding some of the other foods that's on the second part of the slide, which is red meats less often. So like less than 4 times a week. Using not a lot of butter and margarine, so you're using that olive oil instead. Limiting that fast food, which is that Western diet approach we were talking about. And then sugars and sweets, which cause inflammation, really reducing those things. So that I would encourage you to take a look at the MIND diet, especially if you're working on improving your memories. These are all great and healthy recommendations. And just as an overall summary, it really is not just a single food here or there, but it is your entire dietary pattern that really impacts how you feel. It can even impact how you look. So making these choices to include many foods and that are recommended, the whole grains, the fruits and vegetables, the lean proteins, the fish, the liquid vegetable oils, all of those together are working to help improve your overall health and your mental health.